It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is David Lancashire. David's the co-founder and CEO of projekt202, an experience-driven transformation firm headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Over the past 16 years, he has refined a methodology for creating and delivering improved experiences for employees and customers everywhere. By observing people in their everyday environments, projekt202 can reveal the reality of their needs to drive real technology innovation. Before joining the company, David was the founder and CEO of Geniet, a technology management consulting firm. From its inception in 1998 to its acquisition of 3 business units by 2005, Geniet became the third fastest growing tech company in the Fast Tech 50. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in business, graduating from the Cass Business School in London, and he and his family reside in Dallas. David Lancashire, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks very much. Nice to be here.
Great to have you with us. And we got a chance to chat a week or two ago and got a little bit of updated and, what's going on, of course, with the pandemic, which is affecting, if not infecting all our lives. Tell us a little bit about how things are going for you, both from a family standpoint as well as a corporate standpoint with regards to the pandemic.
Well, I think it's been a very interesting time to see the world evolving. From a business perspective, we, I think, reflected very, very much what we've seen at a macro level, where there's been sort of a bifurcation of businesses that are impacted directly, those that have actually ended up thriving for various reasons, particularly those in the sort of technology sector that are continuing to build and evolve their product suites. So I think from a business perspective, I think we were an interesting mirror of
you guys been holding your own, so to speak.
As far as the growth of the business, yes, we've definitely been holding our own. We have 6 different offices in the United States, and so it's sort of a portfolio situation. And so, on balance, things have been good. Personally, I think like everyone else is adjusting to the remote work,
new normal,
and Zoom calls all day.
Less travel, more Zoom.
very, very interesting. So
terrific. Well, listen, I'm glad to hear that and glad to hear your family's well. We like to start with the early years, and David, I know you're an immigrant, so tell us a little bit about growing up in the UK. Where that was and what your early family life was like.
Sure. So my life began in the southwest of England, the county of Somerset.
Beautiful.
I lived in a little town just outside of Taunton, Somerset, and between the ages of 1 and 5, that was kind of my life. And then I actually went off to Jamaica for 4.5 years.
Wow.
And so I came back to the UK when I was 10.
Was Dad on an assignment or something? Was a family?
Yes, my parents were both school teachers, and they opened up a school over there, and were teaching. And so by the time I returned to England, I knew more about Jamaica, I think, than I did about England. So that was interesting.
Right. Do you remember the days there growing up and between 5
very
and 10?
much so.
Yeah,
very much so. I feel like when you've travel at a young age, you kind of have these bookmarks that kind of really delineate like things that happened right before you left and when you came back.
Brothers and sisters?
Yep, sister who's living in England,
Mm-hmm.
still in the southwest of England, near
Right.
where my parents live.
Your parents were teachers their whole lives. Has that been a career for both of them?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Are they still teaching today?
No, both retired, and yeah.
Enjoying life in the southwestern part of England. Lovely. And tell me about some of your early, kind of influences or inspirations, things from mom and dad or perhaps others that, had an impact on you during those early years, particularly during the time in Jamaica, how that maybe opened your eyes up a little bit to some different things.
Yeah, I think traveling at an early age definitely did have an impact on me.
Mm.
Imagine, flying into, I think we landed originally in Florida, and you see all these wonderful homes with swimming pools and kind of the American lifestyle that
Right.
contrasted, I think, with kind of what I'd seen and grown up with in the southwest of England. And then we ended up traveling around the U.S. for a little bit while my parents' work permits were coming through for their jobs in Jamaica, and that meant I got to kind of see quite a bit of life in America at that time, and I think it planted some seeds for sure. Here I am living in America years later, so
right.
Maybe there's a connection there.
Yeah.
The other, I'd say, influence I think was that my grandfather had a textiles business in the north of England, just outside of Manchester, and he retired to live in the southwest of England, and so I remember vividly visiting, and he would take out all the different stamps and envelopes and
Swatches.
Stationery and different things from the business, and we'd kind of like play office as young kids.
Nice.
And I always thought, one day I'm going to be a businessman.
Yeah, cool. Were you a good student in school? I mean, with teachers as parents, that's kind of a loaded question, I know, having one myself.
I was definitely self-motivated and always worked hard in school. I'd say I was a relatively good student.
Did you attend the school in Jamaica that your parents taught at?
I did briefly. Initially, we were sent to a different school,
right.
I think to avoid having parents as teachers. But
right.
After a year or two, we did end up there and experienced being taught by our parents as well.
Yeah. Through kind of elementary and secondary, what other activities you were involved with? Any sports, music, theater, debate?
A lot of sports.
Yeah.
I got a chance to, I guess, really enjoy the typical English country school, and there was a lot of tennis, a lot of cricket, a lot of rugby, eventually soccer when I changed schools. But yeah, so a ton of sport, I would say.
Did you have a favorite sport that you excelled at and enjoyed particularly?
I would say that the summer sports of tennis and cricket were my were my favorites, and I still play a lot of tennis today.
Yeah, good. What about entrepreneurial things? You mentioned being exposed by granddad with the swatches and the business. Were there things that you did growing up? It's kind of an American thing to have a paper route and sell Christmas cards, but I'm sure Jamaica and then returning to the UK was a little bit different. But did you have side businesses you were involved with, or what they call it today, side gigs, I guess?
No, not particularly. I did. Yeah. I would help friends in a delivery business to fish and chip shops across the seaside towns that were nearby. Yeah. We did some milk delivery in parts where they were still taking milk to
bottled milk
to the doorsteps and stuff like that. So little jobs like that, but I wouldn't say anything particularly entrepreneurial at that stage.
Right. Was it kind of a foregone conclusion that you'd go on to college for both you and your sister?
It was certainly so in my own mind. I would say there was no doubt. That was the next step was figure out how to get to college and on to doing something in business.
Right. Now you did that in the UK, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then did you go on to have a master's later? Tell us a little bit about your educational background.
No, I went straight to business school, a place called the City University Business School that today is called Cass Business School.
Okay.
And it's right in the the heart of the city of London.
Oh, right.
And it was a very exciting time. Margaret Thatcher was kind of in the middle of doing her early work on the British economy.
Wow, yeah.
Monetary policy was in full swing, and
big transformation.
The dean of our business school would teach us one class a week, and as soon as he'd finished class, he would go down to the tunnel below our business school and get in a car and drive over to 10 Downing Street for the monetary policy session.
Wow.
So
wow.
it was kind of an interesting time where we felt a little bit connected to what was really going on, and I would say the business school was very connected to the city of London.
He or she was one of the top advisors to Margaret Thatcher.
Yes.
He was. Yes. Wow. Fantastic. What great insight. And what were some of the things that you took away from those years, and particularly that particular professor and so forth?
Well, I would say that it wasn't probably until years later that I realized, the importance of what was going on during that period in terms of setting the table for entrepreneurs to come along and sort of benefit from a more open-minded sort of entrepreneurial society, because Britain had felt pretty closed up until that point, and I think Margaret Thatcher did a lot. So I think there were some observations of that change beginning, but honestly, it was quite not. There was a lot of austerity during that period, working against the unions fighting back and all of that. So it's a lot of unrest.
Of course.
And it's a pretty tough period of time.
Yeah, it was very transformational. And the results weren't seen until several years later, right? I mean, not after her prime ministership, and a little bit during, right? Because I think some of those changes were quite far-reaching and transformative. You studied a little bit of market research. I know you got into analytics at that stage. What led you down that path, and from a field of study?
So one of the things that I did while I was at university was helping a professor do some econometric analysis on the effectiveness of various advertising campaigns, and he was running all these algorithms and essentially advising companies on different campaigns that may be more effective than the other. So a little bit of that. With regard to the business school itself, you could basically focus on the finance side of things, which was more natural because the city of London was right there, and everybody would typically go into jobs in the city. In my case, I knew I was interested in marketing and all things marketing, so I just kind of focused in and specialized on that, and so market research was one element that I studied as part of that.
Now we'll talk about your career a little bit, and getting into the software and technology side. But gosh, during those days, that's very early on. We went to school about the same time, and I remember doing Fortran cards while I studied computer science. What kind of software programming was going on at the time you were at Cass?
Basic programming for me. I was definitely not a big fan really of computers or programming. I'd say it was not my favorite thing. So it's interesting that I went on to have my entire career in the technology industry.
Yeah. That wasn't anticipated at the time.
No.
Yeah. So what was that first job out of college? Did you go right into market research or advertising, marketing?
An interesting thing occurred. There was a PC clone manufacturer in Britain that became the leading player in the market, called Amstrad.
I remember that company.
Yeah. And so the gentleman who started Amstrad's name is Alan Sugar. He went on to star in the Apprentice show in Britain. That's the alternate version of what Donald Trump was in the U.S. And so this gentleman, Alan Sugar, basically was invited to speak at our business school and was ultimately given an honorary degree with Cass Business School. And as a result of that interaction and the coverage in the press of his speech and everything, he set up a program where he wanted to recruit some people from the business school. And so I became essentially one of the first people in that program. And the idea was to sort of, go to head office, learn all about the business, and then potentially move out to some of the subsidiaries in Europe. So I joined in the marketing department initially, and my first task was to help research the German market, where they were wanting to make a direct investment, having had a distributor. And so I was very fortunate landing in that job. That Amstrad at the time was only a 220-person company, but it was one of the most profitable businesses in Britain per person. So at the time, it was about a 1.5 billion revenue business, dollar-wise, and they were very, very profitable, making maybe $500 million.
Exceptional.
So,
and it was all hardware business, I presume.
It was, essentially their business model was taking high quality computers and consumer electronics products to people that previously couldn't really afford to have them. So bringing the PCs into the home and small office was kind of the first wave of that clone.
Kind of an Apple direction or Apple assumption at the time.
And ultimately where Dell came in and filled the spot, as the clone king.
And what was your role? Were you doing marketing work? Was it more sales? Were you getting into, more analytics for them?
I joined as international marketing assistant, and then within the year I was in the role of product marketing manager for business products, awesome. Overseeing the PCs and printers and some business software. So we, again, very lean team, and it was a wonderful experience because it was really like fast-moving consumer goods marketing applied
phenomenal growth,
applied to the consumer electronics space.
Right. What were some of the early leadership lessons you took away from that first job?
I would say that what I got out of that experience a lot was seeing the brilliant mind of the entrepreneur Alan Sugar, and how much attention to detail that he actually had, and in his ability to, for example, calculate pricing of a PC in a whole variety of European countries off the top of his head.
Wow.
And I remember us being, afraid to go into some of those meetings without having all of the numbers, readily at hand, because he was just so gifted and had them all memorized. So that was an impression I had. Again, the other part I think I saw was a marketing and sales organization that was organized to manage a large distribution network. So essentially there were distributors, resellers, retailers, and the whole system was built to promote the purchase of inventory from our business, and then essentially to take that out to market. So we would run very significant national advertising campaigns, and then go announce those campaigns to our distributors and retailers, and then essentially take those stocking orders, and then continue to push through our marketing campaign. So I got to see kind of at close hand how that system worked and operated, and we ran a very important campaign to register all the dealers that were buying from the distributors, because we had so it was a very new channel, and so we were trying to make sure that only authorized dealers could purchase the products, and we could maintain the quality of the channel. So I think I learned a lot about the distribution and the power of distribution,
right.
And that became something that I leaned on later in life, when we started to package.
Well, and the complexity of it too, because this is all pre-Euro time, right? I mean, you were of course in the UK, and you had your pound prices, but you were selling in multiple markets with multiple currencies and multiple distributors. It must have been a very complex time, particularly given the size of the business.
Yep, it was.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you started managing people, David? When was that, and was it hard for you?
I was fortunate to, at age 25, I volunteered to go over to France and run a new office for a company called Uniplex, which is in the Unix software space. And we had done a fairly rigorous search for a leader for that market,
Right.
and we were struggling to fill the vacancy. And so I was a little opportunistic and put my name in the hat,
Mm.
and I was offered the chance to do that, and then with that came the need to hire a small team of people. So I got going management wise really. I would say when I was 25, I did have a
Yeah.
marketing assistant in a role immediately before that, but then I quickly had to manage a team of about 10 people,
Yeah.
hire my own sales team, and so forth in France.
Any challenges there? I mean, did you speak the language? If not, how did you kind of juggle that, particularly given, you're working in an entirely different culture?
Yes, so we did have to learn the language,
Mm.
although because we were selling through distributors, those distributors and the executives that worked for them were obviously very lenient with us
Right.
in our language skills, because there was a desire to do deals and
Yeah.
to work with us. So I was able to get reasonably good at French during that period of
Mm.
time, but yes, all the employees were of course speaking in French, and so it was definitely an interesting challenge for me.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Well, you obviously launched into an entrepreneurial career shortly thereafter, and you've done a number of things prior to where you are today at projekt202. Give me just kind of a brief thumbnail sketch. What made you decide to finally leave Armstead, and then what types of things were you involved with over those years prior to projekt202?
So I felt like I'd always known that my objective was ultimately to go into business for myself,
Right.
and it was just a question of time. So, in fact, what happened with that business in France shortly after my 2 years in Paris, I was offered the opportunity to come and think through the distribution strategy in the U.S.
Hmm.
And the idea was that it would be probably just about a year, and I'd return to London. As it turns out, I ended up shipping all my stuff to San Francisco,
Hmm.
thinking it was a 1 year stay. Went to the Dallas office to get to know everybody, which is where the headquarters was, and then they asked if I'd take on the responsibility for running one of the divisions there,
Right.
but I needed to be based in Dallas, and so I accepted that opportunity,
Hmm.
and of course since then I've now ended up being in Dallas for 26 years since
Yeah.
then.
Wow.
Um, but
From a one-year
so that
assignment.
yeah.
Sometimes life
That's
happens
how
that way.
that's how I landed in Dallas,
Yeah.
and then after a couple of years working in that business, a friend of mine was building a training and consulting business in what was the object-oriented technology space at
Hmm.
the time, and
Right.
he liked the fact that I had a marketing background, and they were just beginning to grow from 9-person organization to probably about 17 or so when I joined, and they really just wanted somebody to come in and look at the whole sales and marketing side of
Yeah.
things. So I was suddenly landed into quite a heavy tech-centric
Yeah.
business in terms of programming, as opposed to where I had been, which was hardware and software. So I was suddenly moving from hardware to software to services
Yeah.
in pretty short order. And
Now this was back in the mid '90s, right, David?
yes, this was the
And
94 to 96 timeframe.
and Dallas really wasn't that much of a hotbed for software and technology development, or was it then? I mean, one always thinks of Austin, right, because of Dell and
Yeah,
the courses there. But was Dallas at that time really booming, or?
Dallas has amazing universities. So
That's right. Yeah.
UTD, for example, had a master's in computer science program that was absolutely top notch. So they had a lot of talent going into places like Texas Instruments, which was
of course
huge at the time. So you did actually have a lot of software architects that were kind of grew up in and around Texas Instruments, and then there was a lot of telecommunications businesses that were busy at work in telecom corridor over in Richardson area in Dallas at the time. So a lot of the clients seemed to be focused in those areas. So bottom line was I got to really see and learn a services business firsthand by really being the first point of contact for companies that were interested in doing business with us. And little did I know that, sort of that network that I was building at that time and my gradual education in the world of software architecture and methods for improving the way that companies were designing and developing software applications. This became quite a key to my later success.
Right. Awesome. And you did a couple of different startups and successfully sold those businesses along the way. Is that kind of how your path took you to projekt202?
So if wind forward to 1998, and an English friend and business partner of mine, Stephen Andrews, was eager to get started building a business. I wasn't sure that I was ready, even though I knew I was planning to do something. But he was very eager to begin then, and so we started to meet for lunches and start to sketch out a business plan. And at that time, 1998, going in.
You were still with Object Space at that time, right? Prior to
I had ended my phase with Object Space and actually did a little bit of work with an educational software startup, and that's where the two of us were comparing notes on potentially launching something together.
Right.
And as we did that, of course, the whole business world was hotting up around the .com era, so that all the businesses were heading to the web, and so there's a lot going on, a heavy amount of demand, and frankly, the challenge was how on earth were we going to go out and begin a business and attract and retain highly skilled people when everybody could get the most wonderful job in the world.
Right.
And so that became kind of the key to where we spent our time thinking. And so the reverse engineering of that ended up with something that I would describe as an attraction and retention engine for highly skilled labor. So the idea was we would create groupings of people. So take the software architecture space as an example. We'd build a subsidiary business under our holding company, and then we would essentially provide 49% of the equity to the team that was coming in with those skills in that area. And by pulling together, an expert and their peer group of experts, we could then go to the potential clients and explain that we had, essentially a team of co-founders and owners of the business that wanted to assist them, and there would be a reliability of that team sticking together and actually finishing projects and getting things done at a time when it was very, very difficult to have that continuity. So that was really a very key thing, was the knowledge that we were going to have a tough time recruiting, seeing that there was excess demand over supply, and saying, how do we solve the supply side of the problem? And while we came up with that, that idea as a way to solve that, it didn't make it any easier because we were unknown. We were diving in the deep end.
Right.
We didn't really have a business development engine, so we had to kind of get out there and start calling and
Wow.
finding new relationships. And so it was very much the typical entrepreneurial test of
Model.
can we make it through the first 6 months and actually land our first contract and all of that.
And you did that for a number of years, and obviously successfully.
Yes, so that business really got launched in 1999, and it was called Genient, and we grew that over the years through to the summer of 2007 when we sold it to EMC.
Okay, right. Cool.
And it was a full suite of capabilities around upgrading IT environments for large enterprise businesses. Did
you stay on with EMC for a while after that, or had your payout and moved on?
That was a fairly short transition. I did about a 6-month period of transition, and their philosophy was very much not to try and motivate the entrepreneur to stay, and we had a very solid management team that we'd put in place. I'd been studying Good to Great at the time, the book Good to Great, and
one of my favorites.
and I guess the takeaway and the test was, do you have a company that's capable of existing and thriving without you?
Right.
And so in the year prior to selling, I'd really taken that on board and essentially put a president in place and a whole team. And while it dented my ego a little bit to be not needed, I was doing that by design at the time, and it worked out extremely well, in fact.
And then that led to Bold Ventures, which I guess was the fertile ground of which projekt202 came out of. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. So my business partner and I essentially funded another holding company called Bold Ventures, and our idea was to look for people that were probably similar to how we were when we had started Genient, and give them an opportunity to build and grow a business, and that we would be resources and coaches to help the team succeed.
Kind of following that same model of shared ownership and them having a stake in the game. Yeah.
Yep. So then with the shared ownership model, we basically created subsidiaries by location. So as we were building out offices, we had Dallas, Austin, Seattle, and so each would be a subsidiary inside projekt202, and projekt202 corporate would essentially own a controlling interest in each of those subsidiaries. And then eventually, with the idea being at the point of selling the business or going through an IPO, there would be an instant roll-up of those businesses based on a pre-configured formula as a multiple of the profits of that business.
And does Bold Ventures still exist today, or has it all been kind of wrapped into projekt202?
It still exists today, and
so some other ventures.
It's relatively low-key organization because we all transitioned into being full-time at projekt202, and
cool.
so
And you've been there for, gosh, it looks like a little over 11 years. Tell us a little bit about projekt202, just kind of the business concept and, your mission and values.
So if going back to the Genient days, one of the things that we were able to do was successfully deliver large-scale complex software applications for big business. And it was a heavy emphasis on architecture skills and iterative incremental development, what many people see as agile development today, the methodology agile. And we were very good company at executing agile projects. And so it wasn't really until we began the journey of what could projekt202 become that we began to realize that a business that we'd bought in 2005 as part of Genient, that was a user experience company, had really kind of added a significant amount of value, and the final year and a half or so of the life of that company. So we knew that things were happening in the user experience space. We knew we had strengths in heavy lifting architecture and technology capabilities, and we knew that the search and digital was changing things.
Right.
And so
we
sort of took those three elements and said, okay, our go-to-market strategy is really going to emerge out of this. And again, we funded a team of people to begin that business, and we were really the coaches. As that was unfolding, I was presented the opportunity to chat with a company called projekt202 that was based out of Austin. It was founded in 2003. And I got to meet one of the founders there called Peter Eckert, who's a German guy, and he basically started to talk about this very structured, step-by-step program of better understanding the ultimate user of a software system, the customer, the employee, the business partner, and so on.
Right.
And he started to talk about unmet needs, aspirations, emotional connections, things that we had never discussed in the agile development world. And so I had always struggled with the idea of you have these very bright, creative people being landed into projects to help the experience be better, but I really wasn't convinced that there was a repeatable set of activities that these team members were going to use that we could scale effectively. Whereas Agile was very defined and we knew what everybody was doing and what their roles and responsibilities were, suddenly we had this UX piece, and it was like kind of like sprinkling magic on the project and hoping that that team member was having a good day, and that caused consternation and concern about scale. So when I was talking to Peter at projekt202 out of Austin about this step-by-step programmatic way of driving to this deeper understanding of the unmet needs, the light bulb kind of went off for me that here we have now almost what sounded like German engineering, because I was talking to a German, applied to the creative space, which was really a method of framing exactly what needed to get designed, developed, and delivered in the experience. And so that moment of sort of recognition of, wow, this is amazing. I called in the CEO at the time and said, you got to listen to this. And he instantly agreed and saw the same thing. And so we decided to acquire projekt202 at that time and rebrand the business that we'd begun in Dallas under projekt202. So that was my role as chairman at the time. A couple of years later, my friend and colleague stepped out to do a healthcare startup, and so I was asked to step in as CEO in 2013 for projekt202. And that was really the time where we were cementing this end-to-end methodology of being able to really frame what needs to get designed, developed, and delivered in this experience. And that really transformed things, because we were moving from not just being an agile development type company but being a business that was going beyond agile and was really being user-centered, or what today we call experience-driven. So we think of ourselves as being in the experience-driven transformation space at projekt202 today, and that's all about putting the experience first. How many companies do you walk into where you would say, wow, the experience using that software is just so amazing. I can't wait to sit down and use this piece of software. Yeah. And so what does that say? That says that there's a lot of opportunity to improve things. I think wave one was all about automation, right? And getting things to work, and it was like the system does what it needs to do. But today it's about, okay, there are real people using this, and these are suboptimal experiences, and we need those to match the very best experiences that those people are having engaging, maybe with an app on their mobile phone and so forth. So that's really where the genesis of the full end-to-end capability of Project 202 came about. And so we started to build on that. And I think this is where I took something from the Amstrad experience originally of distribution channels and scaling a business, in that what we tried to do was create a set of elements in the capabilities that we wanted to deliver to our clients and provide all of the things needed to go and open up a new office in a new city so that a team of people could get together and then become successful taking those capabilities to market in that geography.
And what customers do you serve, David?
We typically work for some of the largest businesses in the world. So Mercedes-Benz Financial Services, Southwest Airlines, very, very large.
Not other software companies, large enterprises that are incorporating your
There are many software companies that come to us as well because they're looking to deliver a better experience. Our typical target would be enterprise businesses. But many software companies are looking to us to upgrade their experiences as well.
How would you say, you talked earlier about your leadership style early on and had some very, insightful thoughts about it. Would you say it's evolved over time, or you pretty much sticking to your knitting in terms of how you lead and develop people?
I think I instinctively moved towards this idea of self-interest at scale. I was very interested in how businesses scale in general, and suddenly I was in one of the business areas that I think is quite difficult to scale, meaning you're scaling through people. So our revenues grow by adding additional consultants that are going to work in our teams. And unlike product companies that can kind of potentially keep headcount lower and scale the production of the products, we had to have mechanisms in place that could govern the way those groups of people operated. I think that I had seen through that reverse engineering of how on earth were we going to attract and retain teams of people in a marketplace that had so many jobs, that began the idea of getting behind the idea of self-interest at scale. So if we could have shared ownership and a clear framework for how value could be created by different pods of success located in different regions of the country, we could empower these teams to go off and be successful on their own with some support and help from the corporation, but predominantly let them go out and have that sense of entrepreneurial teamwork to go off and build something for themselves.
So how do you do that? Because, not everybody's got an entrepreneurial streak, and, a lot of software developers and programmers perhaps, aren't high on that scale. Maybe they are, but, what do you look for when you're making bets on those people you're going to invest in, particularly given that they're, in satellite offices in different areas? How do you sort for that? How do you interview for that?
And I guess what I was hitting on was more sort of the entrepreneurial spirit across the team of kind of a shared ownership. What we were providing or have provided is a successful formula, a set of capabilities woven together. What we've done in both businesses, we wrote a book about our vision for how businesses could benefit from leveraging the methodology that we had available. And so by documenting that, it was another method of bringing tangibility to the capability. And again, meaning that you didn't necessarily need an entrepreneur who's going to create something from scratch. But it could be entrepreneurially minded management team that could grow the business. And so again, I think that just taps into more the idea of self-interest.
Sure.
and sort of how.
And you had the playbook developed, basically.
Exactly. So there's governance and support around that.
That's awesome. And then do you personally get involved in the selection of those people, David? Is that something your broader organization do? Because still, it does require someone that can, follow those rules and follow the playbook too.
That's right. Yeah, I would typically get involved in selection of the general manager for that region, the person that we were offering that opportunity to run that business in that region. And then I would work with typically the national practice leader for the capability. So we typically would have an experience research capability, a UX capability, a technology or software development capability, a program management capability. And so those leaders nationally would help select the candidates that would be responsible for the quality of the service for that capability in that region.
What kind of questions do you ask, though? If you have, 20, 30 minutes with someone, let's say they've been through a vetted process, you've had, those project leaders get a chance to review them, you've got your 45 minutes. What do you zero in on? What is it that you try to get in that interview to make sure you're hiring the right person?
I think the first thing that I'm typically trying to discover is the capability. Does this person have the necessary skill? If that's established relatively quickly, and honestly, it typically is, because in my interviews, I've usually been given that candidate because they've come in with the right background. So that capability is kind of a checkbox. The whole aspect of the person, their character, and integrity is something that I think I try to spend my time on understanding and what sort of drives and motivates them. So that my questions tend to be around trying to discover who that person really is.
Who that person is.
Those awesome. Key drivers.
Yeah. Well, David, we're just about out of time, but we always ask our guests, what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone who, perhaps has their eyes on the corner office, or like you, wants to be an entrepreneur? A lot of our listeners are folks that are maybe 10, 15 years behind us in their careers, and, they're planning out their plot. What would you say to that person, or perhaps your younger self 15, 20 years ago?
One of the things that I think is most misunderstood about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship is that we are sold this myth of massive risk taking, and that it's almost essential that you take these huge risks. And I would argue that actually the job of a great entrepreneur is to figure out a way to underwrite or manage that risk and make it as low as possible. And so, for example, the first thing that I did to gain confidence of launching a business was I knew I had a little bit of a nest egg in savings that I put into a house in the UK. So while I was based in Dallas, and I invested a small sum of money with my business partner and another friend, I knew that if worst came to the worst, this wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah, you had a place to stay.
and that meant that I could be a little freer in my thinking and had a higher degree of comfort that it wasn't 100% on the line. When Richard Branson launched into the airline business, he had a music business that was delivering a certain amount of EBITDA per annum.
Yeah.
And what he did was he took that profit from that year and invested it in short-term contracts, one for leasing the airline, getting pilots for the year, getting access points at the 2 airports. And essentially, if that business had not worked out that year, he still had the business that was producing some EBITDA. All was not lost. And yet I think the way it's portrayed to the world is this sort of massive risk-taking that is required, and therefore it's not attainable for you. And I think that's the myth I would want to dispel and change, and say, do everything you can to build methods of underwriting these risks,
right,
so that you're taking a lower risk and you're getting closer to playing with house money, so to speak, as early as possible. And that's going to give you confidence to try some things and to take the element of risk that you must take.
Well, David Lancashire, Chairman and CEO of projekt202, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thanks very much, Brent.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.